Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. In today's show, we're joined by Rita Gigante. Rita is a highly acclaimed healer and psychic, as well as an author, speaker, and teacher. Her book, The Godfather's Daughter, an unlikely story of love, healing, and redemption, tells the story of Rita growing up as the daughter of the notorious mafia boss, Vincent the Chin Gigante, leader of the Genovese crime family and head of all 5 New York crime families for many years. Hello and welcome to the show, Rita.
Oh, thank you for having me, Bob.
It's great to have you on. You're based in New York, are you?
Yes, I'm in New York.
Now, normally at this point in the show, I normally ask guests about their life's journey, but to be quite honest with you, your life's journey is more like an odyssey. I don't know where to start. So I was going to sort of throw it over to you. I mean, I'd love to talk about the healing and the psychic stuff that you do, but I think it's important for listeners and very useful for listeners to actually hear about how you've come to where you are. So could you just tell us a bit about what life was like when you first started growing up, please?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for those who don't understand what an empath is, I am an empath, which is someone who could feel everything around her. For me, it's like I can connect to anybody's energy at any time, or they can connect to my energy, or I can walk into a room and feel the room completely. And if I'm not careful, I can be, taken, not literally, but like taken out of my body in a sense, like feel like I'm not even in the room because there's too much stimulus coming at me. So sometimes it's very hard to, walk into a supermarket or a place where there's numbers and numbers of people.
Yeah.
Even a restaurant could affect me. So what I have to do is, as an empath, is continually protect myself daily. So I go through a ritual of protecting myself and grounding and centering. Now, when I was, young, I remember being the age 5 and having my first anxiety attack. I didn't know, had no idea I was an empath when I came here. I didn't become an empath. I was actually born that way. So I was picking up my mom's energy, my dad's energy, the family's energy. I was picking up the people around us, my dad's, people that worked with my dad. And it was, for me, completely overwhelming because I could not differentiate between what I was feeling and what I was picking up for others. And so I was carrying a lot of stuff. So when I had my first anxiety attack at the age of 5, I had no idea what was going on. My family had no idea what was going on. And back then, in 1970s, nobody understood really what an empath was.
No.
Now, growing up in my family, we were a very close knit, and for a long time it was all about family. If it was extended family or friends of my dad's, or people that worked for my dad, I knew that, but I didn't know many other families or people outside of that. So I was consistently bombarded with it. My first panic attack came at the age of 7, where what I would do, unbeknownst to me, I only realized this much later in life, I would go into my mom's energy and I would help her because she was depressed a lot. And when I would go into her energy, I would go in and then come out. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And at the age of 7, she was having a really hard time, I want to say. And when I went in to help her, it was almost like I didn't know how to get out of the energy.
How did you actually help her?
So I would go in and take her emotions.
Yeah.
I would carry them so that she wouldn't, similar like to what animals do for for their masters. Like they'll take on stuff for them, and
Yeah.
then they'll go outside and they'll release it into the earth.
And when you took on that energy,
Yeah.
and that feeling that she the stress that she was going through, that then made her feel better, did it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So it helped her, but it hurt me at
It
the
hurt
same
you.
time.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know at that time, at the age of 7, how to get rid of it.
No.
I just knew that it would help her. Now, moving forward, all right. So what happened at that point where I felt like I couldn't get out, I had a panic attack. The panic attack got me out of the energy.
I see.
So
Yeah.
moving forward from that point, whenever the stimulation was too much or I felt afraid of not being able to come back to my own energy, I would have panic attacks. So that's how that began.
So young to be having it.
Yeah. And not knowing why,
Yeah.
But, of course, when you're in a family like mine where your dad does what he does, there's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of, nobody speaking really because nobody was allowed to speak about it.
Yeah.
They were trying to protect me by not telling me anything, but I was feeling everything. So I knew something was wrong. I knew something was off. I knew something was, sometimes imminent, like something imminent was happening.
Yeah.
So not knowing just added to the anxiety, added to the panic. And then around age 10, I developed OCD, which became really my friend because it was like, it was a way for me to control something where I felt so out of control because I didn't know what was happening around me. Now, the one thing that saved me as a child was sports. So I was a tomboy. I was very, very good at any sport you can name. I did, and did it pretty well. So the physical part of that kept me in my body and I was able to release things that were stored in my body, which was fantastic because I probably would have ended up either on some heavy medication at that time or something else. So as life went on, I didn't know I had these healing abilities. I didn't know I was a psychic, and honestly, I didn't know I was a medium until my father came to me when he passed on. So, growing up, I had no idea what I wanted to do because in an Italian Catholic family, your job as a woman is to take care of your mom. And I was the last one, so it was on me to do that.
Yeah.
You were to get married, have children, cook, clean. It should have been very simple. And I came in with knowing at the age of 11, I was gay. I was not going to get married to a man. And I was not going to physically have children because I knew my body could not handle it. So I'm carrying now my own secret on top of having to carry whatever I think are secrets in my home.
And you so eloquently put that in your book, Rita, where you're talking about, and I won't send any spoilers. We can probably do the odd one, but I won't give anybody the spoilers, and we'll put the link to the book later. But all that stuff going on, which was a huge amount of stuff, and then what happened at 11 when you tried to tell your parents that you wanted to come out. I can only sort of imagine how difficult that must have been for you, and I guess the sport was a way of, as you said, channeling some of that energy into something else other than sort of going inwards.
Exactly. And I was outside constantly. Even in the winter, I would just feel better outside of my house. So I would stay out a lot. And it wasn't until the age of 19 where I was so tired of being either having depression, anxiety. I would get sick a lot. So I'd have a lot of upper respiratory infections, my ear, nose, and throat. I had pneumonia, you name it. Like it was all in that area. And knowing today what that is, not being able to speak your truth and, grief and all of that. I was so tired of being sick and depressed because what would happen is I would go into deep depressions and I don't know if anybody would know what the dark night of the soul is, but I'll explain that. When we're ready to release something very deep and old, our body cannot necessarily handle everything in one shot. But what would happen to me was I would go into what would be called the dark night of the soul, and I would retreat for 3 weeks at a time. And I would begin to release in physical, mental, emotional way. I wouldn't eat, very little, drink very little until my body was done processing. And then I had and I always say this was spirit pushing me. It was like all of a sudden I got up from the chair and I would, get in my car and, go to McDonald's and buy 2 large fries and a milkshake,
Yeah, I found those bits in the book quite amusing, actually.
Yeah. I would thank God immediately, because I remember hearing in the background, like when I was pretty much out of it, I remember hearing them saying, I'm going to have to take her to a hospital if she doesn't eat soon, and I was like, I'm not going to no hospital. I'm thinking to myself. But then, it just happened. And usually it was 3 weeks at a time. So they were very painful moments. But in the end, when I was done processing, there left a lot of openness in my body where I could bring more light in. And so at the age of 19, I was tired of feeling that way. And I decided I'm going to try and come out, to my mom and dad. And it was at my house in Old Tappan where I grew up, because my dad was visiting. And I remember it was very surreal. I remember pretty much being out of my body. I was not in my body. And so I was sweating profusely and so anxious. But, I just knocked on the door and I sat on the bed. And I said, I really have to tell you something. And, they were I want to say relaxed and just listening, like, sure, tell us, and I just said, I like women. I said, I'm gay. I like women. And, there was like dead silence for like 20 seconds. And I thought, oh my God, I'm so screwed. Like if in that moment I could just pull it out of the air and put it back in my mouth, I would have.
Yeah.
And my mother just looks at my father because she doesn't know what to say. And my father goes, this is okay. He said, kids go through this. Meanwhile, I'm 19, right?
Yeah.
Kids go through this. They're, they explore, they experiment. He says, and then, you'll meet a nice guy, you'll get married, you'll have that kind of, and now I can't even hear anything, because now I'm like, the fact that he even reacted the way he did was incredibly astonishing to me. I thought he was going to immediately get up and smack the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And he remained so calm. And I thought to myself, oh, I am so screwed. Like, this is worse than him getting up and hitting me,
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I said, you're right. I said, I'm probably just going through something, and, it'll just have to get out of my system, kind of thing. I remember. And then, it was like, okay, I'm going to go in my room. And then he says to me, so why don't you stay away from your friends for a while? Meaning the girls or whoever I hung out with, So, and of course in that life, you weren't allowed to even go near boys, as well. So it was like, okay, yeah, I went in my room, shut down completely, crying hysterical, fell asleep, and lived like that till I was 24.
Yeah.
And
so
then,
just picking up on that bit about you weren't even allowed to meet boys as well.
No.
What was the idea with your father's sort of background and everything? Would he have sort of preferred to have almost had an arranged relationship for you, do you think?
Not so much arranged, but it would have to be, someone that he would maybe approve of, and he would meet him and, all of that. But even so, like, even if I came home, probably wouldn't have went well, even if I came home with a Jewish man, or forget a black man, that would have never happened. Or a Spanish man. Like, he would have had to been some sort of Italian, American, Irish, something
Yeah.
along those lines,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just how it was. He was it, back then, that's how they grew up. There was a lot of fear surrounding what they thought was good and what was bad, and who
Yeah.
should be near them, and all of that.
Yeah.
So it was his own ignorance
Yeah.
that created that, and so of course he lived in the city, and I didn't pay attention to not hanging out with friends. It was more that I was crying because I couldn't release myself. And
Yeah.
I was so tired of not living my truth and then having to carry all the secrets of the family. Because by 19, I knew.
Because in the book, I think you mentioned you didn't actually know officially what your father did until you were about 16.
Exactly. Like how you know, but
Yeah.
you know things, but you don't know what you know and how you know it, right?
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of culminating because I was hearing things from, people at school, and this one girl would, call me a mafia princess. And I was like, what, I just was trying to put all the pieces together. I knew he was important, even at the age of like 10, between 8 and 10, I knew he was important because he would have these, meetings at my grandmother's apartment with, his guys, and they were like family to us. They were very good to us, and they loved us. And, I just thought of them as the guys,
Yeah.
I didn't think anything more, but, I would be able to witness, the phone would be off the hook. The radio would be on, the TV would be on loud. They would only either write something on a piece of paper or whisper to him. And then if they whispered, he would whisper back to them, and then he'd say, now go do it, but never out loud, So I'm watching this and I'm going, okay, he's important, but I really don't know what he does,
No. There was one experience in the book, I think you were about 5, when you were underneath the dining room table and you witnessed
Oh, yeah.
a rather nasty event. Can you tell
Yes.
listeners about it?
Yeah. So when I was 5, I was playing underneath my grandmother's table on Sullivan Street, and it was a dining room table, and there was crayons and paper and all that, whatever I was playing with at the time, and I was listening to the music. It was Italian music in the background, and normally that's what was being played. And I remember hearing these, like, this struggle and these footsteps, and men like speaking, but really couldn't understand it. The radio was pretty loud. And then I just remember seeing their legs underneath the table, and I'm like, to myself, I'm thinking, what is happening here? And all of a sudden I hear somebody, I hear a crack, like almost like a punch. And, I see this man hit the floor, and immediately, he looks at me, I look at him. So I start to shake, and I start to move back from, back further. And I have myself kind of balled up, and I'm just looking at him, and I see the blood start to trickle towards me. And now I see a hand flying down, hitting him again and again and again. And the only reason why I know it was my father was because he had his pinky ring on.
Oh, right.
And I knew the pinky ring.
Yeah.
And then he never spoke. So the last thing he did was step on his face. And in a very low whisper, he said, I'm done with you. Now get him out of here. And I thought to myself, oh my God, is he dead? Is he alive? Like, I didn't know what to think, like shaking, like everything went blank.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, honestly, that is what provoked the initial anxiety attack in me.
Yeah. Well, 5 years old, what a thing to witness.
Yeah. And nobody knew I was there. It wasn't until afterwards that, I was there, and they were trying to say, Daddy just got angry, just got upset, everything's okay, blah, blah, blah. But I was in shock, total shock.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing how you went through all this experience as you grew up. And one thing I always find quite interesting is that, for people who haven't had any direct contact with the mob, the mafia or whatever, and perhaps have watched The Sopranos and seen films and things like that. At one end, you've got this violence and this stuff going on, and the other end, you've got this love, this love of families. You've got the going to church and everything. It seems a real dichotomy.
Oh my God, it is. Yes, it was very much of a dichotomy um, because also too there was this piece of my dad, that was gentle, and
Yeah.
unless I would speak about it, maybe nobody would know that, because they're looking at him. Some people look at him as this icon, this great guy who helped a lot of people, and that is very true. In that neighborhood.
Wait, sorry, he helped a lot of people.
Yeah. So I'm
Right.
going to explain that. In that neighborhood, that was his neighborhood. He protected whoever was in his neighborhood. So, and also they felt protected. And if they couldn't pay their bills, or they didn't have enough money to eat, or whatever it was, my father gave to them,
Yeah.
He had an affinity for the elderly, and especially if people had children, he would help anybody that, needed to be helped. So there was a very, very giving side to him. And he was gentle with me because he was afraid of hurting me in any way, because of my anxieties, because of my panic, because of the, what I was experiencing as a child, being sick all the time. So I remember laying on his back, and he would rub my head, and he would rub my back, and, I'd fall asleep. So there was a lot of gentle things the way he was with me, where maybe my sisters and brothers experienced him different because they were so much older than me,
Yeah.
And also, there was a side to him that could play a little bit. I would be able to get him up, dancing to Elvis in my grandmother's apartment, which, for a man who had two left feet, he still got up and shimmied.
Yeah.
And, when I saw those sides of him, I was like, oh, there he is. There's his soul. There's my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was this complete opposite side, that although I didn't witness, anybody being killed, except for that man on the floor. I don't know if he died, but, I didn't witness him necessarily giving a direct order or anything like that.
No.
I knew, I knew what was happening.
Do you think it was a path that he had always wanted to do? Because he started off as a boxer, didn't he?
Yeah. And it's interesting. He never really, the money wasn't necessarily the biggest piece for him. He liked the power.
Yeah.
He did like the power. But, another thing people might not know is I talk to my dad all the time now. So there was actually a point where my dad didn't want to be that. He didn't want to be the head of anything necessarily. He just got swept in and decided, because there was a moment where he could have went a different direction.
Yeah.
And in that moment, he felt like he needed to do it because for him, it had to be done a certain way for it to be right. It wasn't necessarily, and I'll tell you why he felt this way. Vito Genovese was very, very different than my father and ruled very differently. There was a code of ethics and that they followed in that way of life. And my father was a stickler for that. He was very much, this is how it is. And he was a very fair man. So he ruled it also like a businessman, and he felt like if he didn't take the helm, that it wouldn't go that way. So he saw opportunity. He took it. But there was a piece of him at one point that says, I don't know if I want to do this, necessarily. Once he made the decision, he was all in, though, because just that was his personality,
Yeah, and I guess when you sort of said earlier on he swept into it, I guess that was by some of the acquaintances that he made.
Oh, Vito loved him. My God, Vito loved him. He's the one that, got him to box, and the guys put him in there. He was 16. He wasn't supposed to box at 16, and then he loved boxing. He could have done a career like that, But he could have done any business because he was extremely smart in that way.
Yes.
And so, yes, he got swept away, swept into it. And once he knew the rules and all of that, he knew how to do it, and did it well.
Yeah. I mean, having read the book, and I think I mentioned earlier on, I just finished it about an hour ago. Fantastic read. But
Thank you.
You talk about the struggles that you were going through, and they were huge as you were growing up. And it sounded as though your father was going through not the same struggles, but similar sorts of struggles in his own life.
Yes. I often think to myself, the man never went on vacation other than his honeymoon with my mom. Really only walked, certain blocks and, maybe drove to certain places, but he wasn't free, No. And even though he went behind bars twice in his life, I would say I would feel behind bars most of his life, because he couldn't have that freedom just to be him, just to be Vincent, not so much with that title that he had to bear. So, and I didn't feel free either. I was also struggling with, my sexuality. I was trying to make everybody happy around me. I was realizing I was sacrificing myself, on the altar for what? Like I was just sick, I was physically ill from it. So at 24, I came out completely to my mother and I said, you do what you want with it, but this is who I am and I can't live like that anymore. My mother accepted it. She was more afraid, because she was raised very Catholic and religious. She's more afraid of my soul not going to heaven than she was of anything.
Yeah.
And I said to her, Ma, I made peace. And I know I'm a good person and God knows my heart. I said, so I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is me continuing to get ill. I said, and I can't do it anymore. So he was never told in this life, while he was alive. But listen, all mothers and fathers know these things.
Of course.
They just don't want to deal with it, So as long as you don't say it, it's not real.
Yeah, and I guess as you said earlier on, the way they're brought up is that they will just pass it off, and they
that's it.
It's not in their not so much in their interest, but they're not able to cope with. They haven't got a process to be able to use to actually cope with things like that, I guess.
Exactly.
Another recurring thing that comes up in the book the whole time is the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, which you were part of, and how you sort of said that it's man's interpretation of the Catholic Church, which, somebody like your mother would think that your soul would have a problem, rather than Jesus himself. That was quite an interesting bit.
Yeah, I mean, I knew at a very young age that I felt very connected to the energy of Jesus and Mary and the angels and some of the saints, but I had no desire to talk about a God who was vengeful or created fear, or I just didn't believe it. I just didn't believe it. And I knew, like my soul knew, and I carried the tradition with family for as long as I could, and then I backed away completely. And when I got into my work on a spiritual level, I carried Mary and Jesus with me. They speak to me now not as a Catholic icon, but as a guide to help me help others when necessary. So, and they're not the only ones I can speak to. Buddha's been in my energy. Native Americans have been in my energy. It really depends on the person who's coming to see me, and that's who shows up for them.
Yeah. So we spoke about we've spoken about your father, we've spoken about your upbringing, we've spoken about the Catholic Church, and we've spoken about your feeling or your experience of being an empath.
Yes.
What I'd like to talk about now is when you first started realizing that you were able to heal, if that's okay.
Sure. So my healing process began at 19 because I put myself in therapy. I actually found a therapist and I put myself in therapy. So as I was working through things in therapy, which was phenomenal because it was the first time I was able to bare my soul in any way, I started to realize that I could, I started to realize that people would come to me for advice all the time and I never understood why. And they just recognized something inside of me that I wasn't even aware of yet. But I started massage school at the age of 24, and I was working for a chiropractor at the time, and I noticed he had all massage therapists on his staff. So I said, I'm going to put myself through massage school because it seemed like the next best thing. I was at that time a exercise physiologist or a personal trainer, and I was working with people that way, but I just wanted to learn more.
So was it your love of sport that got you into that in the first place?
It was the love of sport, but I was also able to work with a personal trainer, exercise physiologist. And when I saw the changes in my body and how it could help people, I immediately got drawn to it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So I was doing that for a while. And then I went to massage school. And then I realized when I put my hands on people, I felt the energy and I could feel what they were feeling emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. And I could feel what was going on in their body and know what was affecting them, whether it was their liver, their stomach, their spleen, whatever it was.
When you say you could feel it, can you tell us what that feels like? Because that's
sure.
For some people that would be quite hard to understand, I think.
So because it was physical for me at the time, I may have pain in that area. I may feel a coolness in that area or a heat in that area. I may feel just a vibration in that area. But when I would close my eyes, I could see it as well. Like I could see the energy. And sometimes it would look dark. Sometimes it would look scrambled, it took on shapes of its own. And then I would have to ask questions. So, because I wasn't proficient at it, so to speak, at that point. So I would ask them questions like, I can feel this in the body. What's going on? And then they would confirm for me, what was going on. Then as time moved on and I became proficient at it, then it was, okay, is it coming from the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, or the physical? Where is it coming from?
Yes.
So, and then I would begin to feel it that way, right? And get answers that way. So also, so everybody understands, my gifts became evident. I mean, I was an empath my whole life and born a healer. But so clairsentient is to be able to feel things, right? So I was using that gift. Claircognizant is to be able to know something and not know how you even know it.
Right.
And that was starting to happen when I was working on people. I didn't know how I knew it.
So that's something that sort of gradually came.
Yes.
Right. So it wasn't immediate. You just gradually got that. You were able to actually. Was it claircognizant? Was that
claircognizant? Yes.
Yeah.
And so, as I was also being taught by others before me, because Spirit introduced me to others that understood healing work and the psychic and the medium stuff, I started to learn from them as well. And the more I did it, the more, I became proficient at it.
Yes.
The clairaudient, which is to be able to hear, and the clairvoyant, to be able to see, came later in life. So I was probably, close to my 30s when that began to open up. So, and again, through massage and through, just then I was doing healing work. Then I was just working with people's energies. So I learned about the chakras. These are energy centers in the body that we have. And then people had the choice. Do you want a chakra healing? Do you want to massage? Either way, the energy got worked. And sometimes it was a combination. So the mediumship, the part where I can speak to people on the other side, even animals, came when my dad passed, which was in 2005 when he came to me.
Did you say animals?
Oh, yeah, animals too. I can connect to animals, alive or past. Um, and so when he came to me, I realized, oh my God, I can now do this, you know, which, it was kind of then all brand new again for me. It was like, oh, well, what's the difference? And you know, there are psychics and mediums that will say, do you want a psychic meeting or a psychic reading or a medium reading? And I'm like, yeah, no, it happens all at once for me. I don't know how, but I can't distinguish between the two.
Hmm.
So when people come to me for a reading, they're getting all of it, including, healing or even some spiritual mentoring. So that came in 2005. And then, I was told by Spirit I'd be writing a book, but I didn't know what it was about. They just started to tell me about to start to write or journal my, my story. And they were telling me it was to help me release. I was journaling to help me release. But I didn't know it was going to be necessarily the book.
Oh, right. So this was the beginning of the Godfather's daughter.
Yeah.
Ah,
Now you got to understand, it got published 2012, right?
Yeah.
I was told by Spirit 15 years prior to begin to write. So it was in the making for a very long time. And we all knew, well, listen, I didn't know. This is why Spirit didn't tell me what it was going to be back then, because the family wasn't supposed to know about it back then, obviously. It would have never got published if my father was alive. And so I waited 7 years after he passed, and my mother grieved, and everybody was on their way before I published it.
It must have been very cathartic to actually go through all that.
It was one of the best tools for my healing by far.
Yeah.
And I continue to journal today, and I tell people all the time,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I read the book, as I say, finished it today, and it was released in 2012. A lot has happened since then. Is there another book coming, do you think?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, there is another book coming. I'm in the middle of processing all of that now, and I'll be working with my dad and my mom this time. My mom wants to be heard more, so I'll be working with her as well, and I'm excited. I'm excited.
Some of this stuff for listeners will be quite, how can I put it, interesting and perhaps a little scary. Because you mentioned there about working with your mother and father who've passed. Some people would, some skeptics might question it and challenge it and all the rest of it. What would you say to them?
Spirit always reminds me about stuff like that. Because I've questioned it before, and they would say to me, it's really none of your business what other people think. There are going to be skeptics. There are going to be people that don't believe, but that's not your concern. Your concern is your work and to help as many people as you can. And I stick to that fully. It's like, I can't convince everybody in the world, but it's not for me to do. They will feel the energy of it. They will know if, I feel to them. And I've already gotten people that have said to me, are you crazy? Are you psycho? Or are you psychic? The whole thing. I've gotten the whole gamut.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I just, I just stay in my center, and I say, okay, it's not time for them to realize it. It's not time for them to wake up or be aware or whatever it needs for them to. It's like anybody else. There are many people in this world that are helping, right? So you're just kind of, you're planting seeds, you're leading them. And then when they're ready to, to water the seeds, then they're ready.
Yeah. And the other thing that comes up in the book is some of your colleagues who also psychics have also experienced, your father talking to them as well.
Oh yes. If he needs to get a message to me and I'm either really busy or I'm not paying attention, especially in the beginning, when he first came, he will hound them until he gets what he wants, so to speak. So now he's much more gentle. When he first came, he was like a bull in a china shop, because he wanted to get to me and tell me how he felt and apologize. And, hours and hours we spent going over things with my friends telling me, through them, and then him coming to me on his own.
Yeah.
So now has a much more gentle, entrance and exit.
Yeah.
So I'm honestly, honey, I'm not here to convince anybody. They'll feel if it's authentic to them or not, and if they're ready, they'll connect to it, and if they're not, they will find another way.
Sure. Does it ever scare you, some of the experiences that you've had?
Oh, sure. I mean, they were very good at bringing me through the experience methodically, spirit, because of how sensitive I am. So they were very, very good at. But still, there were times, especially going through the dark night of the soul. There were times where I was like petrified, you know. But there were also times of tremendous grace when I was able to surrender. And that the minute you surrender, things change within milliseconds.
Do you think that you would sort of be where you are today in terms of how you are healing at the moment, if you hadn't had that first sort of 16, 20 years of hardship and turmoil in your life? Do you think you'd be doing what you're doing now?
I think I'd be helping people, but I think I came in with the contract of doing this, and I needed my family to show me, the truth of everything, and how to get to that truth, and had to experience all of that. So I wouldn't change it for a second. But I think, listen, I could have ended up in a different family experiencing something completely different and still would have ended up helping people like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely, it molded me to who I am today.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I don't expect you to talk about your clients themselves, because obviously you wouldn't, but in terms of what they experience when they undergo this, what sort of things happen?
So, I've had people, for the most part, experience tremendous peace, and they feel very light when we're done, because we've removed things that are in their energies for sometimes from when they were young children. They feel very much at peace. They feel like something's been lifted. Some people will feel a physical healing happen to them.
Yeah.
Others will feel an emotional healing or a mental. Now, understand that, I'm just that conduit that's bringing the healing. They're really doing the healing. They're the ones responsible for their own healing. I'm just connecting them to spirit through my hands and my energy, and they're actually doing it. So, but they will experience that, and they will get exactly what they need for where they are in that moment. So some people need to heal in layers. They can't just rip off, like we peel like onions, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some need to, peel off one at a time. Some could rip 10 layers off. So everybody is completely different, but they will go home with a sense of renewed energy. They will feel like, okay, I can move forward now, because, I've given them, the spiritual mentoring through spirit, and the actual healing itself. So the healing comes in many forms.
And how different is it for somebody who, say, would go and see a psychiatrist and talk things through, as opposed to what you do? How different is it?
Well, talk therapy is excellent. I've been through it, but there comes a time where, at least there came a time for me where I said, yeah, I'm kind of like all talked out. Like there's nothing more that I feel like I could talk about here. I kind of got it, and now I needed to move to another thing to help me. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would never tell people. Don't go to talk therapy. I'd say for me, talk therapy was fantastic, but honestly, the healing piece of it was happening much quicker for me when I did this kind of work with others.
But does the work that you do, does that involve any talking as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right. So it's massage, it's hands-on, and it's also talking.
It could be hands-on, it could be hands-off. It depends on what spirit directs me to do.
Oh, right.
Then they will probably get homework in the end, and they either choose to do it or they don't. And that means spirit will say, okay, now I need you to go home and journal for 15 minutes, every day at night before you go to bed. Like that's an example. Or, I need you to, plant things around the house, to get into the dirt, to get outside, to get, connected to Mother Earth. That could be another example. So it's kind of like a full experience. So to speak, like if they were to go to a full service salon, it would be like the same thing. They would get exactly what they needed here and
So
then.
it's fully immersive.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so how long does a session take?
Typically, it can take anywhere from a half hour to an hour,
Yeah.
and that depends on what they want.
Yeah.
So what'll happen is they'll book a session, and then Spirit knows what's going to happen that day. So they'll either make it whatever they chose. If they chose a half hour, then whatever needs to come through in a half hour comes through.
And all these sessions done in person, or can they be done remotely?
Oh no, they can be done remotely. I've done remote healing and psychic readings and all of that, all through COVID.
I was going to ask about COVID. So you carried on doing what you do during COVID, and how far afield do you do it? I suppose it doesn't really matter. You can do it anywhere in the world, I guess.
Oh God, I just spoke to somebody in where were they in overseas, Germany.
Oh, right. Yeah,
It was Germany. Yeah, I've spoken to people in Italy. Yeah, all over the world. Switzerland.
Without sounding sexist, does it tend to be more women that come to you, or men, or is it a mixture of both?
You know what? Interestingly enough, it's a mix now.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning of my work, yes, there were more women. Now it's a mix.
I mean, one of the reasons I said that, I was looking at some of the testimonials on your website, and I think that about 90% were women.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. And we can only put up so many testimonials because,
of course, yeah.
There's, but yeah, I'm so happy about that too, because, I know how difficult sometimes it can be, for men to connect to that, but
Yes.
a lot of men from that life that used to be in that life has connected to me. And others that just want to learn.
When you say in that life, what you mean
in my dad's life?
Oh, in the mob. Yeah.
Yeah. In my dad's life. So,
Oh, right. Yeah.
and I know that that's him, working with me.
Yes. Yeah. Tapping them on the shoulders.
Yeah,
saying,
exactly.
A little bit of homework for you. Come and see my daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned about people's energy. And you mentioned earlier on about you could go into a restaurant and feel it. Do you sometimes observe certain individuals and think, oh, they've got a lot on them? You see people, I mean, even somebody such as myself can see somebody walking down the road and they look as though they've got the trouble of the world on their shoulders. They may not have, actually, but that just might be me. But you see that in people, do you?
I do.
Yeah.
So before I go anywhere, like I said, I protect myself, right? But I can still witness things without it affecting me once I protect myself. So what I'll do is if I see somebody like that, I will just say a prayer for them, and ask Spirit to send them light and love at that point. Because I have to cut off at some point. Like if, and I would love to just be able to go around like touching people and, saying this, that, the other thing, but I'm not that type of energy,
No.
I have to protect my energy a lot because of the sensitivity. So, but Spirit always says to me, just by saying that prayer, it goes up, they hear it, it's done. It's like, now what if everybody in that restaurant did that for that person that was having that, that feeling? So
they'll
now
be walking on air, I expect.
Right. So now I tell my friends when I'm with them, if I witness something, I'd say to them, pray for that person right now. They need a prayer. And I got people doing it with me, so, and that's the beautiful thing about prayer. And, people say, oh, I'm only just one person. How can I affect the world? And I say to them, you don't realize just your prayers alone reverberate around the world. It's energy. Everything is energy. It's not the physical piece that you need to use for this, So, just enough people praying in a room, it could change, a storm that's coming.
Yes, I know that with the butterfly and its wings and all that.
Sure.
It's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes you go into a room and you see some people and they're very negative and they almost drain you of energy. Other people come in and the whole room lights up with their smile.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've witnessed it countless times. And, they're having a really good day or they're having a really bad day for whatever reason. But,
So if people are interested in contacting you, where should they go to? So
my website would be the best. It's ritagigante.net. And that's the best way to contact me, because if they want to set up an appointment, they want to connect to me. Once I get their information, then I will reach out to them and set it up the way I do it. So.
And you've already said it can be anywhere in the world. So we've got any listeners out there who think, I've got something I'd like to share and I could do with a bit of healing. We'll put that on the show notes for them so they can contact you. What about people who perhaps just feel as though perhaps life isn't going quite as it should do, but they don't want to go down the road of actually getting involved with a healer? What would you suggest to them?
I would suggest to them to connect somehow, be able to connect somehow to Mother Earth and Spirit in a way that they feel comfortable, that they can then, begin to dialogue with the energy. So, it may sound strange, but you can dialogue with Mother Earth and Spirit just the way we're dialoguing, right? And they hear everything. But just to open themselves up to it, because a lot of people don't think that they can do it. And I teach that. I teach them how they can do it. But I find that being outside is a phenomenal way to connect both to Spirit and Mother Earth. So there are a tremendous amount of books out there that they can read, connecting and learning that they are, I want people to know that they're physical, but they're really, it's their spirit that's here driving the show. It's not the physical body. We're having a spiritual experience here. The body's just, kind of the vehicle, and we had to take it on to do this. But, connect to that spirit part of them, connect to the inner child. Really important to connect to the inner child, especially if there's any trauma connected to that.
Since you wrote the book 10 or 11 years ago, what new things have you been doing, Rita?
Oh, God. So recently I'm taking my stuff out now on the road. So I've been doing a lot of interviews, we're going to be doing podcasts. We're going to be doing, let's see. So when I say on the road, I'll be able to go to, places in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all over the states. Yeah. So we're going to take it out there and help as much people as we can. So we're the whole idea is to get, as much as we can up online for people to be able to connect to, because I know it's very much of an online network now. I love the in-person connection with people, but I get it. We're in this world of social media and stuff. So there'll be a lot of things on social media. Yeah, we're plugging away.
But I guess with a massage, obviously that can't be done remotely. So that would have to be in person.
Actually, massage, I don't really do it anymore.
Oh, you don't? Oh, right.
No, because Spirit has moved me into more of the healing, the psychic, the medium, the spiritual mentoring. And so I don't actually need to do it. And interestingly enough, there will be some times where they'll say to me, I have to massage an area, but nobody has to take their clothes off or anything. It's like I could do it right over the area and it's done.
Well, Rita, this has been a really interesting conversation. I appreciate you sharing the story of some of your earlier life challenges, which must have been very difficult. It's fantastic to hear how you're helping people. And I think that through this conversation, I've learned a lot about spiritual healing and psychic ability. My guest today has been Rita Gigante. Rita is author of The Godfather's Daughter, and you can find a link to Rita's website on the show notes. Thank you for coming on the show, Rita.
Oh, Bob, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to maybe speaking again.
You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family. And if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.